Hello and welcome to the Becoming Your Highest Self podcast. I'm your host, Macy Renee, and we are going on a journey together, my friend. If you've been looking for a podcast geared towards your growth, self-awareness, navigating your brain's daily mind drama, and deep inner work to become your highest and best self, you are in the perfect place. Let's get started. Good morning. How's everybody doing? My name is Macy, and I'm so excited to welcome you to Becoming Your Highest Self podcast. If you're brand new, thanks for joining. I hope that you enjoy the episodes. A lot of people like to start from the beginning and work their way through, but you don't have to do that, although I do recommend it because I think it'll help you understand more of the concepts. And if you're a returning listener, thanks for being here and for your support. We are almost at 100,000 downloads. 100,000. You guys, I don't know if my numbers are good in the podcast world or slow, but I know that whenever I sat down at a folding table on my very first episode, I recorded that first episode probably 8 times. I cried. I had my computer sitting up on a bunch of textbooks because I didn't have money for a fancy setup. And I had no idea where it was going to go. If I was going to record 5 podcast episodes and then want to quit, or if I would ever get to 100 episodes. So just the fact that I'm almost to 100,000 downloads. I think at this point the podcast has been found and discovered by people in over 100 countries and thousands of cities, probably close to 3,000 cities that the podcast is listened to. So I just have to take a minute and say thank you. I have so much gratitude. So much gratitude. And it's also a reminder for whatever you're doing in your life to keep going, because seriously, the first year and a half, so I think that the podcast is about almost 2.5 years old. Almost. I started it in October of 2019. So October to, 2021. Yeah, so 2.5 years old-ish. Here's the interesting thing. The first 1.5 to 2 years, the podcast only received about 250 downloads a month. That's not a lot. P.S. That's not a lot of downloads. And I remember looking at that number and thinking gosh, when will it grow? When will there ever be a time where, there are more downloads in a month? How do you do that? And now I'm so excited to tell you guys that every 90 days, there are over 21,000 downloads. And that's just been happening in the last, I would say, 6 months to a year. So it's just a reminder, don't give up. Whenever I look at the statistical charts from where I started to where we are now, it's this huge curve. It's slow, all the way up until August of 2021. And then it's a straight shot up, like a roller coaster, hill, when you go up right before that huge drop. And hopefully we're not going to see any drops here. But it's just grown exponentially because you all are sharing it. You all are consuming it at a much higher rate. I know so many of you all share it with your friends, and I just want to tell you, I'm very appreciative of that. So if my work has impacted you, I would love to ask if you can take 30 to 60 seconds and click the show notes section and fill out a review about how this work has impacted your life, or something that you've learned and how it's impacted your life from this work, on a Google review. So you can leave 5 stars, and you can write a message about whatever you want. And I would so appreciate that. So I'm going to leave the link in the show notes section. And all you have to do is click it and then go fill it out. It should take less than 60 seconds, but it does wonders for the algorithm. It helps more people find me, find the podcast, be able to reach out if they need that support in their life. So I don't take that for granted at all. And I really do appreciate anybody that takes the time to do that. I know some of you have already, and I see it, and I'm very, very grateful for you being willing to do that. So if you're willing to do that still, thank you in advance. I really do appreciate it. All right, you guys. So we're going to dive into emotions, which I know we talk a lot about emotions because I'm an emotional intelligence coach. I love teaching self awareness. That is my niche, that is my repertoire, that's my expertise. But I want to share something that I found really interesting. So a couple weeks ago, I'm in several Facebook groups, different groups for like entrepreneurship and just I honestly I'm probably in way too many and need to go unfollow a lot of them because I don't need to be consuming as much as I am, and some of them I'm not even active in. So I need to go through and clean that up. It's such an energetic cleanse to do that. So if you're in a lot of Facebook groups and you're not even engaging, let me just tell you, the cleanse of removing yourself from all of that is very profound. Any ones that you're not engaging in or really utilizing. But side note, I'm in an entrepreneurship one, and someone in the group, it's got thousands of people in it, and someone in the group asked the question, like, what is something every entrepreneur should know? Or what is something that will make an entrepreneur very successful? And of course, I thought, okay, well, I'm going to share my experience of this. And I shared, leaning into every emotion, being willing to feel it, move through it, have your own back, and move on, right? And I really do deeply believe that. And probably an hour after I posted that, I get a little ping, right, that someone's replied to it. And it's this man, this middle aged or older man, probably in his 60s, maybe early 70s. And the comment says, Macy, I respectfully disagree with you. Feeling your emotions and becoming an emotional person is the worst thing you could ever do in business. It's the number one thing that's going to make you unsuccessful. Something along those lines, like not his words verbatim, but it was something directly related to that. And then there was a comment under his that said, I absolutely agree with you. You should never feel your emotions. Now, you guys, let me just tell you when you know that you've done the work. One, I didn't have a very strong knee jerk reaction. I didn't feel the need to defend myself or over explain. My first thought went to curiosity. That's when you know you're practicing a lot of emotional intelligence and like you're actually a living product of the work, that I didn't feel defensive, but rather very curious. So I read his comment and the person that commented underneath him, multiple times. And I asked myself multiple times, like, what do I think about this? Do I like, because here's the thing, you want to be neutral. That's the key with emotional intelligence and emotional awareness, is that no matter what's happening outside of you and around you, you have the ability to come and be a very neutral party and see things from multiple perspectives. That's part of the work, is not staying in like a fixed mindset all the time, because that's what your brain ideally wants to do. It's being willing to see other perspectives. So what I found very interesting is that I didn't immediately feel defensive, like I've got to go prove my point and tell them all the reasons that they're wrong. I instead just leaned into that curiosity that I felt of like, I wonder why they're thinking emotions are bad. The first thing that I kind of thought about is, one, the age, right? They were both gentlemen. older males. I would say the initial one that commented was probably in his 60s or 70s, and then the gentleman that commented in agreement or in agreement with him was probably in his like 30s, late 30s or 40s. And I found it very interesting, right? Because we tend to know, even through psychology, that women and girls develop emotionally a lot faster than men do, and that they tend to be more tapped into emotion than men are. And so I started thinking about this and how our society has really conditioned this belief that men showing their emotions or feeling their emotions is this bad thing, that they are supposed to be protectors and they are supposed to have it all together, and that, showing emotions is weak and that it's this very bad thing. And it's not true, but it's the way that we've kind of conditioned men in our society, right? So as I was reading the comment multiple times just to kind of gather my own thought process, I was like, that's so interesting that both of them have so much resistance to an emotional experience, and that they had an emotional reaction to even just reading my comment, right? Like, that's what created the action, because we know thoughts lead to feelings, feelings lead to actions, actions lead to results. They, like, the circumstance itself is that they read my comment on that post. They had a thought, she's wrong, or oh, poor thing, like she thinks that feeling your emotions is powerful or something you should do in entrepreneurship. So they had their thought. Their thoughts about me being wrong led to this feeling, okay, of whatever they felt. I don't know, whatever emotion that it triggered within them. It doesn't mean that it was a horribly negative emotion or whatever, but it did trigger a feeling. So defensiveness, maybe, or frustration. I don't think frustration would have been right, but whatever feeling. And their feeling is what led them to their action. And the action was to respond to my comment and let me know that they highly disagreed with my perspective, but respectfully. They did say respectfully, I disagree. And then, the result of that is that they didn't get a response. I didn't actually respond back, but instead I really thought about it for several days, actually. Like, okay, I want to understand where this is coming from, and really ask myself, do I agree with myself, right? And the answer that I have for that is yes, I do agree with myself and I disagree with them. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's nothing wrong with the fact that they disagreed with me. There's nothing wrong with the fact that I disagree with them and that I'm choosing to stay in my belief. And the reason why is because I would not be where I am today if I had not learned how to feel every single emotion. And I think actually in my comment, I put on there, if there's nothing you're unwilling to feel, there will be nothing you're unable to accomplish. And that is another part that they responded to, that wasn't true, right? For them, it wasn't true. But for me, this is very much true, because what holds people back a lot, and I've seen it coaching a gajillion clients, right? Like, I've had tons of clients in the last 4 years. And I also do work on the side for another coach in their program coaching people. And I've coached over 400 times. So, for whether those people have come back a few times, but you could count it as like over 400 individuals I've coached just for another coach. And every single time, what holds people back from their own success, from their highest self, is the inability to feel and process emotions. People don't want to feel what they're feeling. People want to bury what they're feeling. People want to pretend it doesn't exist. And it doesn't matter how far you're shoving your subconscious stuff down to the tips of your toes, let me just tell you, it's still there. The emotions are still there. You are never exempt from feeling emotions unless you're numb, okay? And that's not necessarily a great place to be. If you're numb, there's a few different things going on, right? Like your body is just in shock or almost like it's been in constant fight or flight for so long that now it's just at this plateau of, or if you're on medication, I know like people who get on sometimes antidepressants or anxiety medication, sometimes it keeps them so at bay that they don't experience the heights of emotion, but they also don't experience the lows. And the medicine is to keep them from experiencing those low lows. But as a result, they also don't experience the wide depth of the highs. And I know a lot of people like that, right? Where they're like, I don't really get excited or I don't really feel happy. I just kind of feel like, meh, I'm just floating. I don't really care about anything. Everything's just kind of blah, and they don't get to experience the full range of that. And so I think it's super important that we understand that even if you're in a meh kind of situation, you still experience emotions. That is how we were created. That's a part of the human experience. But what people forget or what people don't realize is that just because you aren't looking at it and just because you aren't feeling it, like you have an ability to distract yourself or cope in another way, doesn't mean that the work isn't there. And the more that you lean in to the things that are creating that emotion to begin with, not only do you get better results in your life, but you genuinely get to know thyself, right? You genuinely know who you are at a very deep level and why things aren't maybe working for you and why things are working for you. So, most of my life, I did not feel my feelings. I didn't know how. It's a skill. And I, even as a woman, had this perception that feeling your feelings or showing your emotional side made you weak or made you appear weak. And I went through a lot of trauma in my childhood, my young adulthood, just a ton of different things that I experienced. But I didn't actually feel the emotions. Like every time the emotions would come up, anxiety, depression, sadness, fear, um, anxiousness, any kind of negative emotion, when it would come up, I would distract. Or I would go to a therapy session and I'd, release everything I could onto the therapist and I'd feel better temporarily, like for maybe 2 days. And then everything would start to consume me again. And I couldn't wait till the next therapy session to like word vomit it all, right? Like to get it all out of me again. And then I'd feel good for 2 days and then I'd go back. And it was like this vicious cycle of like, okay, I keep talking about it, but it's not getting better. And it's because there's a difference between talking about it and processing it. Okay. And a lot of people are afraid to allow their emotions to bubble up to the surface and process them because you're afraid of what you might find. I was really afraid of that. I was afraid that if I allowed myself to feel my emotions, I might not be able to control myself. I might never, like, I might end up in a dark hole of facing my stuff and not be able to get out. I might end up in a super depressive state and never be able to get out. That was like my fear. So it just felt like it was easier to keep things at bay and not feel them. But the interesting thing about that is I was still storing everything. I was still storing all of my emotions. And whenever I decided to do the work and hire my coach and really take charge of my life and get my power back, I had to be willing to let all of those emotions that I had stuffed down for years come up to the surface. And as I addressed them one by one by one, I I increased my emotional self awareness. I increased my ability to be assertive. I improved my stress management. I, was able to better control my impulses. I was better able to understand myself. I was better able to understand other people. And I think sometimes we dismiss how vital this work is, and the potential that it has to change the whole trajectory of your life. And it's interesting because whenever I am around different males and just listening to how they conversate when emotional topics are brought up, they joke on each other, they dismiss each other, they refer to it as very girly, you're getting emotional. What are you going to cry now? Like, it's so interesting for me, especially as an emotional intelligence coach, to hear how men navigate their emotions. It's like such a dismissive thing. And I think that that's honestly sometimes what makes it hard for women and men to coexist, because women women tend to be more tapped into their emotions, but not always, like, don't always know how to regulate them. And so that's, I think, sometimes why the male energy comes in very strong of like, I've got to hold it together. She doesn't know how to regulate or control her impulses. And sometimes that can create like this feeling of, someone's got to be the safe place. And so men tend to take on that energy, but as a result of even women not knowing how to control their own emotions or be aware of their own emotions, then men don't ever have that space to kind of grow in that department because they feel like they have to have it together all the time. And then what's interesting is women who have maybe experienced a lot in their life, who have childhood trauma or who have had to grow up very quickly, tend to take on more masculine energy, which is what I did. And so I was tapped out of emotions for a very long time until I started coaching. Like, even with therapy, I was emotional, but I wasn't tapped into my emotions. And there's a difference. And I wasn't willing to feel my emotions. I was willing to talk about why the feelings were there, but I had no concepts about around like how you feel them, the importance of emotional awareness, none of that. So the way that I came off in a lot of relationships was masculine. I can handle it. I'm going to put on my big girl panties. Like, I've got this. I don't need to cry about it. Nobody's going to help me. It's okay. And holding it together for so many years, eventually I got to the point where I cracked. And I think that sometimes that happens for a lot of men, is that they're holding it together, they're holding it together, they're holding it together. They need a space to navigate and feel and express their emotions, but they don't know how without it coming across as like weak, or them being emotional, or just this banter around it being a negative that they feel emotions. And it's so interesting because you can feel emotions yet not be quote unquote emotional, but it's a skill, and it's a skill that needs to be taught. And by God, I feel like that's been my mission on earth, is to do that, which is why the Equip Society was created, because I wanted more people to become emotionally aware. I wanted more people to be able to step into their emotional power. And while there's only women currently in the Equip Society, it is open to men as well. And my vision long term is that there are one day thousands of people in there, men and women, all working on their emotional intelligence, self awareness, their skill set, improving their emotional intelligence, so we can all coexist and be able to like truly live out every desire in our heart, because we're not afraid to feel emotions. We don't consider emotions a bad thing. So I know I went down kind of a rabbit hole, but that's what this experience in this Facebook group taught me, and reading it over and over again, and just tapping into my own, like, yeah, do I want to agree with what they're saying of like emotions have no place in business, or do I believe the opposite? And coaching hundreds of clients, my own experiences, I'm like, no, emotions should be there. Your emotions being there, and again, being emotionally aware does not mean being quote quote emotional. But being emotionally aware means that you're able to show up and create boundaries, that you're able to recognize your own emotional triggers, that you have impulse control, that you have the ability to be assertive, that you are, able to show up socially for and like advocate for things that you believe in and actually get your message across. There's so many skills that come along with emotional intelligence, and it's actually 15 different skills, and I teach all of them in the Equip Society. And so there was a part of me that wanted to comment, like, I respectfully disagree with you, and here's why. But at the same time, I also checked in with myself, and it just didn't feel like the step to take. Um, However, I think that more education needs to be presented, and I just took it as my responsibility to continue to put my work out in the world and teach people this balance. It's not all or nothing. It's not, constantly, what's the word I'm looking on? Ruminating on all of your emotions, and it's not being totally tapped out from your emotions. There's a balance, and with EQ, that's actually what we're looking for, is helping you get more balance in your chart. So when you join the Equip Society or when you work with me one on one, the first thing that we do is have you take an emotional intelligence assessment. And it gives you the exact breakdown of how you're showing up in all 15 categories and your score overall. And anywhere where you're out of balance, that is where your work lies. Is why am I out of balance in these certain areas? And how can I get myself back on track so that, it's not all or nothing. It's not, I know how to navigate my emotional experiences because, again, when there's nothing you're unwilling to feel, there's nothing you're unable to accomplish. And it's such an important skill set to develop. It helps us conversate better. It helps us build stronger relationships with one another. It helps us go after what we really want. There's just an endless possibilities when you're willing to work on those skills. And so, what their comments in response to mine taught me is I need to go out there and continue getting my message across in the world because I know in my heart of hearts that it's what's missing in our society is real education around emotions and emotional awareness and emotional resilience. And when we can strengthen that, everything else can change. Okay? So that's today's message. I hope that you enjoyed it.